Today I'm going to be reading you a Dr. Seuss book named Daisy Had Mayzie. The story of Mayzie who sprouted a daisy and how that one small flower grew into a big problem. This will be interesting. It's hard to believe such a thing could be true, and I hope such a thing never happens to you. But it happened, they say, to poor Mayzie McGrew in room number 8. It happened like this. She was sitting one day at her desk in her school in her usual way, when she felt a small twitch on the top of her head. So Mayzie looked up and she almost dropped dead. Something particular was going on there. A daisy was sprouting right out of her hair. Boing! Behind her was sitting young Herman Butch Strudel. This does look like a daisy up there on her noodle. It doesn't make sense why it couldn't be so. A noodle's no place for a daisy to grow. Then up spoke another boy, Einstein Van Tass, the brightest young boy in the whole of the class. It's a very odd place to be sprouting a daisy, but nevertheless, one is growing on Mayzie. Hey, look it, cried Butch, right there in this room. Daisy had Mayzie. She's bursting in bloom. Miss Sneetster, the teacher, came rushing up quick. Such nonsense! Some child is playing a trick. Which one of you boys stuck that thing in her hair? You know that a daisy could never grow there. But teacher, said Bush, I saw the thing rise right out of her head with my very own eyes. Just give it a yank. If you think I tell lies. Miss Sneetcher had heard quite enough of this talk. Mayzie, hold still. Let me get at that stalk. Ouch! Hollered Mayzie. Quit yanking, Butch said. You're giving her pains. I bet those roots go way down to her brains. The kids in the room started shouting like crazy. Daisy had Mayzie! Children, be quiet. Miss Snitcher was puzzled. Good grief and alas! To think this has happened right here in my class. I taught in this room 20 years, maybe more, but I've never seen anything like this before. I have to report it. You just have to come to the principal's office to show Mr. Grum. Now the principal, good old Mr. Gregory Grum, was a wise man, just as smart as they come. He knew more about anyone else in this nation, about long division and multiplication. He knew all the answers, why oceans are deep, why skies are so high, and the mountains are steep. He should have the answer to this thing on Mayzie. My word, he declared, it's a genuine daisy. I've seen them quite often in fields growing wild, but never before on the head of a child. Now, what in the world ever made this thing sprout? I have no idea, but I'm going to find out. It says here, daisies grow on the land. They grow between rocks. They also grow in the sand. It mentions right here they can grow in a pot, but mention the head of a girl, it does not. Daisies, it says, sometimes grow in Alaska, also Missouri, Rhode Island, and Nebraska. They grow in Japan, in Spain, and Peru, in India, France, and Idaho, too. They grow in South Boston and also in Rome. But why should they grow on this little girl's dome? Say, look it, said Mayzie. It's wilting, said teacher. How wonderful, Mayzie. It soon will be dead. You'll get rid of your daisy. In just a few minutes, our troubles will pass, declared Mr. Grum. Take her back to her class. Then the principal saw the most terrible sight. The daisy was dying, and that was all right. But the daisy was part of poor Mayzie McGrew, and Mayzie started to wilt away too. Teacher, said Grum, you know what I think. They're both going to die. Hurry, bring them a drink. This is a problem, said Grum with a frown. You take Mayzie away, and you make her lie down. You lock her up tight in that room down the hall. There are quite a few numbers that I've got to call. Get Maizie's mother on the other end of the line. I need her quickly while there's still time. Maizie's mom asked, what's all the fuss? Goodness to Betsy, I'll be on the next bus. A call to the shoe store reached Mr. McGrew. He answered while holding a customer's shoe. She is growing a what? It's coming right there. And he ran out the shoe store with no time to spare. A doctor should see her, the principal said. An expert on plants like the one in her head. So he called Dr. Eisenbart, who said, goodness gracious, a child with a head that is partly herbaceous. I simply must see this. I'll come over to you. And his patient, though shirtless, came to see it too. Then Grum called Finch the florist, who grabbed his shears. I'll be there as fast as my truck can shift gears. Meanwhile, poor Mayzie lied down on the couch. A daisy slumped down on its stem in a slouch. But the window was open because it was warm, and the sweet-smelling daisy attracted a swarm of bees! 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 Mayzie jumped out the window as fast as she could. But the faster she ran, the faster they flew. In the park, she ran into Officer Thatcher. The bees on her heels were just starting to catch her. He said, "Wait a minute, kid, I'll be right back." He left Mayzie alone to fend off the attack. But Thatcher returned with a fishbowl and a bucket, into which went a fish from the bowl. Then he stuck it on top of her head. She fell like a fool. "Kid, I'm taking you back to your school." Principal Gum didn't know what to do. "It's worse," cried Miss Snitcher. "Much worse than we feared. The Daisy and Mayzie have both disappeared." Behind her came charging Mr. McGrew, chased by a customer chasing his shoe. Flinch the Forest, Dr. Einstein Bart too. Dr. Eisenbart patient and Mrs. McGrew. Wow. When the door opened and in came poor Mayzie, wearing a fishbowl protecting her daisy. Then Officer Thatcher, who looked all around, said, "Anyone here know this kid I found?" "Mama!" cried Mayzie as she ran for her mother. But Mrs. McGrew stepped back with a shudder. "I think I feel faint," she just managed to utter. "Stand back," yelled the doctor as he looked about. "Allow me some room to examine her sprout." The doctor approached, stethoscope to his ear, but the wail of a siren was soon all he could hear. His Honor the Mayor. And then, without warning, the door opened wide, and who but the mayor should step right inside. In acting important, there was none to compare. He was best at long speeches, chock full of hot air. "I promise, my friends, that if I am reconnected, this daisy on Mayzie will be disconnected. The law of our fathers is simple and sound. Daisies belong and should stay in the ground. The rest are illegal. I bar them from town." Then, just as the mayor finished his talk, Flinch the florist began to quietly walk, and standing directly behind Mayzie, said, "I know the way to get rid of the daisy. So there's a flower between her two ears. I'll snip it clean off with my sharp pruning shears. But Mayzie saw him and let out a screech. She pushed him aside and raced out of his reach. Mayzie ran from the school, headed straight out of town. She came to a meadow and fell to the ground. With her head in her hands, she lay all alone. Her heart was broken. She could never go home. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me. Nobody loves me, she cried. Nobody loved her, poor Mayzie McGrew. It's hard to believe such a thing could be true. And maybe that's why then this daisy above, when Mayzie below, begin talking of love. Well, you know about daisies. When love is in doubt, the job of the daisy is to try and find out. They love her not. They love her not. Don't worry, Mayzie, said her daisy, as its last petal found. They love you, and the stalk disappeared. Well, that's how it all happened. The thing went away, and Mayzie McGrew is quite happy today. Back at her studies, she's doing just great. All of her subjects in room number 8. And concerning that daisy, you know that it never grew out of the top of her head again ever. Well, it practically never popped up there again, excepting occasionally now and then. Ding! And after all, I'm getting used to it, she said. Maxwell, that's the end of the story about Daisy Head Mayzie by Dr. Seuss. It turned out pretty good. She liked that daisy after all. It's probably time for you to go to bed now. I love you, Maxwell. You have sweet dreams. Until next time, bye-bye.